So today we are going to talk about Paticca Samuppada because we have had some difficulties like not understanding this properly, especially because some translations I have been using was different from the common translation. And most of you who have been reading about the teachings of the Buddha, or sometimes you have been studying the teachings of the Buddha from teachers, learned from teachers who have been using different words for the Pali words in translation, especially the common translations that we find in the books comes from the early translators, mainly Rice Davids and some others who translated joining him, like F.L. Woodward and Madame Blavatsky, and so many other people who translated these things. And so, what I have been doing is, I have found that some of these translations are not really conveying the meaning expressed by the Buddha, because I have been doing a lot of research to discover the original teachings of the Buddha. And so what I understand from that research is that some of these translations can be misleading. So, especially this teaching called the Paticca Samuppada, which is the most important teaching of the Buddha. If you take the normal translations, you'll be thinking of something else. Now here I have a book here by Atang Brahmavanso. I think you have heard about him and you know who that is. And he has written two articles here. It was really two speeches he made. One is about what is called anatta. Anatta means that there is no self. That is a part of the teaching of the Buddha, very important part. Although we think we have a thing called a self, what the Buddha taught was there is no such thing as a self. And that is called anatta. And the other is paticca samuppada. So the paticca samuppada talks about the origin of this idea of self as well as the origin of the idea of the world and the origin of what is called suffering. The main teaching of the Buddha, is what is called dukkha. Dukkha is the Pali word, and the common translation is suffering. So the main teaching of the Buddha was about suffering and how suffering comes into being and how suffering can be brought to an end. So that is the main teaching of the Buddha. And the paticca samuppada is an explanation of this, how suffering comes into being. So, but the unfortunate thing is that the traditional explanation which is found in the modern world is not exactly what the Buddha has been talking about. And it is mainly because of the way those Pali words have been translated. So this is why we have changed the translation. But before we can get into this, it is very important for you to know these words. There are 12 words here. Avijja, Sankhara, Vijnana, Namarupa, Salayatana, Passa, Vedana, Tanha, Upadana, Bhavajati, and Jara, Marana. Now it's very important to know those words. Because if you don't know the words, it's very difficult to understand what I am going to talk about. So can we...
I'm showing it ready. I should come to
it's already there?
Yeah, it's ready on the screen.
Oh.
When you're ready, I will first...
So we have to know those words. Paticca samuppada. Avijja, Sankhara, Vijnana, Namarupa.
They have the chart.
Yeah. So you already have this paper, huh? And in the paper you get those words. Huh? So you should look at those words and now I am going to talk about the common translation first. And if we take the common translation, what that would convey to the reader. That means those common translations build up a certain story. And then we take the other translation and we begin to find out what kind of story that new translation comes up with. These are two different stories. That's the important thing to understand. To put it in short, the common translation is speaking about how a person creates three lives. That means how a person performs some deeds which are called karma. The word karma refers to what you do. What you do in thought, words and action. Three ways of doing things. One is thinking in a certain way, the other is speaking in a certain way, and the other is acting in a certain way. So three ways of expressing your behavior. And according to the way you behave or act, you are supposed to be reborn in the next life. And once you are reborn in that next life, then how you live in that next life will determine how you will be reborn again in the third life. So in other words, according to that way of thinking, what is called the PATICCA SAMUPPADA is an explanation of how rebirth takes place. And so everyone, last time there was a gentleman who asked a question. Now, how are we born again and again in samsara and something like that? Is that a person here today? Huh? Anyway, it doesn't matter. So at least you know what it is. So that is about karma and rebirth, because we are talking about. The important thing to understand is this idea of karma and rebirth was already there when Prince Siddhartha was born in this world. So karma and rebirth is not something new that the Buddha brought into the world. It was already there. And not only that, there were people who were trying to somehow stop this process of rebirth in some way. because they saw that to be reborn is to suffer. And even if we are reborn in a good place, like heaven, still you have not escaped death. Even in heaven, you are going to die again. And after that, you might go to hell or some bad place. So the only way to stop this, they thought, was to stop this process of rebirth. That idea was there even before the Buddha in India at that time. But what the Buddha came to talk about was something completely different. This is the point. So, it is very important to understand this difference. There is a sutra in what is called the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle length saying. And in that sutra, which is called the Sabbasava Sutra, Sabbasava. Now, Sabbasava is also a very important word to understand. The original word is asava. Asava. Sabbasava means Sabba Asava. These are two words joined and it becomes Sabbasava. Sabba Asava becomes Sabbasava. Sabba means all. Sabba means all. Asava means, that word asava is rooted in what is called sra or sru. Now that word sru is a word that means flowing. Now when water flows, we say, it's going sur 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 sur, that you get the sound also in that. And the sru is to flow. And the sru is to flow, but asrava means flowing in. Now the flowing can be flowing out or it can be flowing in. So the word a refers to flowing in. Now we have a similar word, gacchati. Gacchati means going. Agacchati means coming. That is going out or coming is coming in. So in a similar way, asrava means flowing in. We have an English word for that. flowing in is called influence. You know the English word influence. Influence means flowing in. So, this is why I translate that word asrava as influence. The flowing in. So that is a very important word there, because here we are talking about what in English we call emotion. Emotion. Now you have heard of that psychologist called Sigmund Freud. He was also talking about emotions. That emotions are creating problems. You see, the human being is also an animal. According to modern scientific thinking, human being is also an animal. And these human beings, their animal nature is getting angry, becoming greedy for things. This is the animal nature. Fighting, quarreling. Now that animal nature is coming from these emotions. And the Buddha used two words for two parts of our behavior. That emotional part he called chitta. The word chitta was used to refer to that emotional part. Becoming angry or becoming greedy for things or becoming frightened. That is the emotional part, chitta. But there is another part that the human beings have, and that is something that the animals don't have properly. That is the real human part. And that part is the thinking part. Rational thinking. The human being can do mathematics, mathematical calculations, can think about various things, which the animal is not able to do. That is the real human part. And there is a sloka that says, which is very useful to learn if you like to learn that. Ahara nidra bhaya maitunancha samanya metat pasubik samanah dharmohite sa madiko viseso dharme nahinah pasubik samanah. That is Sanskrit. That is a Sanskrit word. Ahara means taking food, eating or drinking, taking food, ahara. Nidra means sleeping. Bhaya means fear. Maituna means sexual activities. Now, these are things that human beings have in common with animals. So that is the chitta. Taking food, sleeping, fear, and sexual activities. These are things that human beings have in common with animals. That is the animal part of the human being. Then that sloka says, Ahar nidra bhaya maitunancha samanya metat pasubik samanah. Pasubik means the animal. Samanak means common with animals. Dharmo hitesa madiko viseso. What is special about the human being is dharma. Dharma simply means the ability to think and reason out, to know what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong, what is true, what is false. That is what is special about the human being. Dharmayana hina pasubik samana. If someone is low in that ability to think and reason out, he is almost an animal. That is what it means. So the purpose of the Buddha was to teach people how to overcome this animal part and develop that human part properly. It is only then that you become fully human. To get rid of that animal part and cultivate the human part. That is the meaning of becoming a Buddha. That is the meaning of becoming an arahant. Now, you may have heard that to become an arahant is to get rid of three things: lobha, dosa, and moha. Lobha is what I call lust. Lobha is lust. Dosa is hate, hatred. The lust, hate, and moha is the delusion of self. All selfishness comes from this delusion of self. Self is a delusion. So it is to get rid of lust, hate, and delusion. That is what the Buddha taught. That is to transcend the animal nature and become fully human. But the problem is that fully human state is not a normal state. The fully human state is not a normal state. It is a supernormal state. That is, you are rising above the normal and you are getting into a supernormal state. This is how the Buddha becomes a supernormal person. And the Arahant, a perfected disciple of the Buddha is also in a supernormal state. Now in modern, what is called psychotherapy, what they are trying to do is to bring an abnormal person into a normal state. But what the Buddha was trying to do was to bring a normal person into a supernormal state. So this is very important to understand, that Buddha was also a psychotherapist, but his psychotherapy was to bring the normal person to a supernormal state. His psychotherapy is not to bring the abnormal person to the normal state, but to bring the normal person to a supernormal state. And it is in order to do this that we have to bring about what is called a paradigm shift. We have a very good word in English for this. That is the paradigm shift. The paradigm simply means the way we look at the world. The way we look at the world, the way we look at life, the way we look at ourselves, all that is the paradigm. So we have to shift this paradigm, change the paradigm. The changing of the paradigm is the way to become supernormal. When we have changed that way of thinking, we are not normal anymore. We have become supernormal. But that changing of the paradigm is not an easy job. What we call the PATICCA SAMUPPADA, when we have understood that properly, we have changed the paradigm. That changing the paradigm is called awakening from the dream of existence. That is the meaning of awakening from the dream of existence. So the paradigm shift is really a method of awakening. We are normally, although we think we are awake, we are really sleeping. We are dreaming. And that dream is, we think we are existing. It's very important to understand this. You see, there is a modern school of philosophy called Existential Philosophy. These people who are followers of this existential philosophy, they pointed out that the most important thing is that the human being out of all animals, it is the human being that is aware of his own existence. That the human being is aware, I exist. And not only that, the human being is also aware that he is going to die. Not only that we know that we are existing, we also know that we are going to die. You see, when people see a child that is born into this world, they are very happy. They think that's a great thing to be born. They celebrate birthdays. But when someone dies, they begin to cry and lament about it. They don't realize that to be born is to die. They never think of that. Only when they begin to grow old, they think, oh, I am growing old. Or when you begin to fall sick, you think, oh, I am falling sick. I might die. You see, they don't see that birth and death are two ends of the same stick. You see, birth and death are two ends of the same stick. So this is the problem. And this is the problem that all religions are trying to solve. You see, now it was the Pope that once said that the Christians have a hope. That hope is that they are going to be going to heaven after death. And to be in heaven is to have eternal life. Once you are in heaven, you won't be dying. So that is something great for them. When they go to heaven, they can be there forever and enjoying the pleasures of heaven. So they say the Christians have this hope. And they have been listening to some of our Buddhists, and they say the Buddhists are beyond the threshold of hope. Why? The Buddhists talk about a thing called nirvana. And if you ask them what is nirvana, they say, it is to die and die forever. You see, they are beyond the threshold of hope. So there was a time when this statement of the Pope was published in the papers in Sri Lanka. And there were a lot of Buddhists who were writing articles to the papers, and they were very angry about the Pope. They were finding fault with the Pope. And at the same time, the Christians were trying to defend themselves, and they were also writing articles to the papers. So, I happened to go to Sri Lanka, and I read these articles in the papers. And I thought of writing an article myself. And I pointed out that the Pope cannot be blamed. He was talking about what their religion tells them. But the Buddhists are the people who have not understood Buddhism. It is incorrect to say that the Buddhists are dying and dying forever. This is because the Buddhists have never understood the Paticca Samuppada in the proper way. This Paticca Samuppada being misunderstood, they think Nirvana is to die and die forever. So this is the point that I am trying to drive at, that Paticca Samuppada is not an explanation of how to stop rebirth. Paticca Samuppada is not an explanation of how to stop rebirth. But all Buddhists think that that is telling how to stop rebirth. The purpose of the Paticca is to point out we cannot die. Why can't we die? Before we can die, we have to exist. If we don't exist, how can we die? Existence itself is a dream. We are dreaming that we exist. It is only when we have understood that we don't exist that we realize that we cannot die. There is no we here at all. This is the important thing to understand. This is the meaning of awakening from the dream of existence. We have to awaken from this dream of existence. It is only by awakening from this dream that all suffering comes to an end. So that is what we have to understand in this. You see, first we have to understand how we are born. Every one of us have been born. But when we were born, what was really born? It was a body that was born. And when a person is born, what is the first thing that the child that is born, what does the child do? All these mothers who have produced children will know what the child does. The first thing is to cry. Why are they crying? It is so uncomfortable. This child inside the mother's womb was warm, coming out is very cold. Another thing is this child didn't have to breathe. Now the child has to start breathing. No one was touching the child inside the mother's womb. Now everyone is trying to touch the child. And the child has to open the eyes. Inside the mother's womb, the child didn't have to open eyes. As everything that the child has to do is unpleasant. But is the child able to think? The child is not able to think at all. There is only feeling. There is no thinking. Does the child know why the child was born? The child doesn't know why that child was born. Does the child know what has to be done after being born? Nothing. This child knows nothing. What is that state of not knowing anything called? That is called ignorance. The child is born ignorant of anything. Ignorant and suffering. So that state of not knowing anything is what is called avidya. That thing called avidya means not knowing anything. And once that child is born, what is the first thing that the child begins to do? It is not just crying. The first thing it has to do is to start breathing. Breathing. If that child doesn't breathe, what happens? The child will die. So the first thing is to start breathing. Now, if the child doesn't breathe, what will the nurses or the doctors do? He'll pull the legs like this and beat the child. That is to get that child to start breathing. You see, the breathing has to be done. That is the first act. And that act of breathing is called sankhara. The word Buddha used, that word sankhara here, the second thing is that activity. But the Buddha spoke of three kinds of activities. Activity of body, activity of speech, and activity of mind, mental activity. Kaya sankhara, vachi sankhara, and chitta sankhara or mano sankhara. Kaya sankhara is the physical activity, which is breathing. Vachi sankhara is a verbal activity, but the child is not able to do any verbal activities at that point. Huh?
Crying.
Only crying, yeah.
Vachi sankhara.
And but the vachi sankhara is mainly forming a verbal concept. And chitta sankhara, which is a mental activity. So this sankhara is the first thing that has to be done. And that sankhara, once that is done, there is what is called Vijnanam. Vijnana is normally translated as consciousness. But this is not the real full consciousness that happens. We have to understand this word consciousness, but the important thing is we become aware of things by means of what? We have 5 senses: the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. 5 senses. So we become aware through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, and the body. 5 senses. So through the 5 senses, what we get is what are called sensations. Sensations and feelings. A sensation is what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch. That is the sensation. And that sensation also has a feeling. The feeling comes in 3 ways: a pleasant feeling, or unpleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling. So the feeling can be in the form of a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If we open our eyes, what do we see? That child just opening the eyes, what does the child see? We think we see objects. We don't see any objects. Only thing we see is light. Light. And the light is seen only as color. Because according to modern scientific thinking, what we see is simply what we call light is an electric current, or it comes in the form of waves, electromagnetic waves. And these waves come in the form of different frequencies. The wave has what is called a frequency. And the eye is able to detect only 7 frequencies. Only 7 frequencies of light that the eye can see. And those 7 frequencies come in the form of 7 colors. Violet, indigo, blue, green, yellow, orange, red. What goes beyond violet, we cannot see. What is beyond red, we cannot see. There are only 7 colors that we can see. So when we open the eyes, what we see is simply color. But when we see the colors, we put these colors together and we create a picture. It's not really something that we do, it just happens to us. We are not doing anything, it is just happening. And we begin to see an image. What we see is an image. An image is a picture, a mental picture. That mental picture is what is called rupa. The word rupa means a mental picture. A mental picture is formed. So it is formed by putting the colors together. Different colors are put together to form the picture. So once we have formed the picture, we still don't know what that picture is. That small child doesn't know. Even if the picture is formed, we don't know what that picture is. So it is the mother or whoever is looking after the baby will say, oh, this is a bottle. So the child thinks, oh, bottle, learns the word bottle. Then when the mother shows this one, the child will say bottle. Then the mother says, no, that is a cup. So the child learns another word, cup. So like that, every new picture is given a new name. So that's how the child begins to learn names. And that name is called nama. The word nama means name. So the picture is called rupa and the name is called nama. But of course, that child knows only the pictures and the names. But there is something more to know about the bottle. But if you touch the bottle, you begin to feel that it is something hard here. Then the child will put it into the nose and see the smell, and put it into the tongue and get the taste. So like that, the child will start using all the senses to identify the object. So it's not only the eye that is being used, all the senses are used. So using all the senses is what is called salayatana. The word salayatana really means the six senses. Ayatana is the sense, sal means the six. Salayatana. But we have only 5 senses. What is the 6th one? The 6th one is the thinking part. But the thinking, how did the thinking come from where? Is it coming from the eye? Or is it coming from the ears? Or is it coming from the nose? Or the tongue? Or the body? You see, there are telephone wires going from the eye inside to the brain, ear to the brain, nose to the brain, the tongue to the brain, and the body to the brain. These are called nerves. The optic nerve, the auditory nerve, the olfactory nerve, and so on. Different nerves coming, like telephone wires. And it is the brain that begins to think and put all this information that you got from the different senses, take all the information, put them together, and that is how you form a concept. So when we think of the bottle, we are not only taking the picture into the mind, but all the senses come together. And once you have come, that is called, in English word is called cognition. Cognition. That means you have created an object, and the moment it has become an object, you see, that is called passa. Cognition is called passa. Cognition is passa. So it's not only that, once we have cognized something, usually you have to understand that I am using new words here because the words that you have read about, they are different words that give different meanings. Because the word passa is usually translated as contact. But here we are saying passa is cognition. Not contact. So once you have cognized an object, you have recognized an object. Recognize is to recognize. Why is it a recognition? Because next time you see the bottle, you don't have to touch it to say that it will be hard when you touch, because you have touched before. So every time you see something, you don't have to touch it to find out what it is like. You already know. That is a recognition. Now when I look from here, I see a clock, and without touching it, I know that how it will feel when you touch, because I have touched clocks before. That is what is called recognition, recognition. Now, there is another thing that happens. Once we have seen and recognized what that is, we relate it to past experiences and also know what you can do with it. When I see a chair, because I have seen chairs before, I know it is something on which you can sit. So if you want to sit down, then I get the desire to sit on the chair. So in other words, I am attracted to what I see, or maybe I hate it. I am repelled by it. Attraction and repulsion. Or if I see it as a snake, I might get frightened. You see, that reaction is an emotional reaction. So I begin to react emotionally to what I see, or hear, or smell, or taste, or touch. So it's an emotional reaction. That emotional reaction is what is called tanha. The tanha is the emotional reaction to what was seen or heard or smelt or tasted or touched. It's an emotional reaction. So, when I cognize something or recognize something, where is that thing? Now if I see the bottle, where is the bottle going to be? Something outside there. The chair is something there. The cup is something here. So it's all something outside. But when I react to that, where is the reaction? Is it outside there? Reaction is not outside, the reaction is inside here. So in other words, I experience two kinds of things. Something objective and something subjective. The object was objective. The reaction was subjective. So I have created two experiences. First, an objective experience, and the other is a subjective experience. So I created a subjective experience by reacting to what I saw. And the subjective experience, what do I do to the subjective experience? The subjective experience, I say, the desire is mine. The hatred is mine. The fear is mine. The worry is mine. What is that? The English word for that is personalizing. I personalize the subjective experience. So I personalize the subjective experience. So once you have personalized the subjective experience, what have you done? How can there be a mind if there is no I? All this time I didn't have any I. But the moment I create a mind by personalizing, I have also created a I. I comes into being by personalizing. that personalizing is called upadana. The personalizing is called upadana. Some people translate upadana as clinging or grasping. Upadana is not clinging or grasping, it is personalizing. The moment you personalize, you have also created an I. The moment the I has been created, what is it that you call the I? The question arises, you can't just create an I without being able to show what the I is. You have to be able to point to the I. So what are you going to point to? If you point to something, you have to point to something that occupies space or time. If there is something that you can point to, it has to be something that occupies space and time. What is it that occupies space or time? The only thing that you can see is the body. It is the body that occupies space and time. And therefore, the body becomes the self. So you take the body as the self. Body is something that occupies space and time. And so you take the body as yourself. That taking the body as self has been given a name that is called Sakkaya Ditthi. Sakkaya Ditthi means my body perspective. My body perspective. You have a way of thinking this body is mine and myself. So you have created what is called a personality. The personality is the body. You have created the personality, that is the self. You have created the self by personalizing the body. By personalizing the body, you have created a personality. But you don't realize that you have created a very dangerous thing. That personality called body occupies space and time. Occupying space, that means it has a length, breadth and height. To occupy space is to have a length, breadth and height. And not only that, you also have a thing called a weight. If it occupies space and it has a weight also. And not only that, if it occupies time, it has a past, a present and a future. So if you have a body which has a past, a present and a future, what is the past of the body? The past of the body is birth. What is the future of the body? The future of the body is death. And in between is aging and sickness. So you have not only created a self, you have identified the body as the self, and not only that, you have also created a birth, old age and death. And to have a birth, old age and death is to suffer. You are suffering. So you have created suffering. By identifying the body as yourself. All this is happening without your knowledge. You don't even know that you have done that. It is just happening one after the other. You are not even doing it. It is not a doing, it is a happening. There is no person here to do anything. The person has been created automatically, depending on conditions. You have not done anything, it has happened, depending on conditions. And you are only suffering as a result. It is only by understanding this fully that you can awaken from this dream of existence. You have to observe this happening. It is by fully observing this happening within you, because it is happening every moment. It is not something that happened in the past. It is happening every fraction of a second. You have only to become aware of this. But we are not even aware of this happening. The mind has to calm down before we can see this happening. It's only when the mind is calm to a certain level that we can see this happening. It is only once we have seen this properly that we awaken from the dream of existence. This is a dream. This is the awakening from the dream of existence. But normally we are so much carried away by our emotions, we don't even know what is going on. We are just like robots. We don't know what is going on. Everything is just happening. But happening due to the presence of the necessary conditions. That is what is called PATICCA SAMUPPADA. When the conditions are present, it occurs. When the conditions are absent, it does not occur. So this is an explanation of what is called the PATICCA SAMUPPADA. I hope you will be able to meditate on this. Just keep looking at this picture. And if you can calm the mind properly and see this, you will become awakened from the dream of existence. You don't really exist. You only have to awaken from the dream. So only when you have awakened, all suffering comes to an end.